I am Brandon Clark. This is Swall Hall, and today we're meeting on Uncommon Grounds. We have a pretty good episode for you today, a bit different in structure as we're having our first guest on. He's a professor in philosophy, which we'll get more into when I intro him. Just so you guys know, he'll go for about half the episode, maybe a little over, just depending on how it flows. And then me and Swall are going to actually answer some questions from you guys after once we get him off. So yeah, make sure you stay tuned for that. It's going to be real good. And we'll go ahead and jump right in as we are joined by adjunct professor of philosophy and literary writer Anthony Vernon, who has some really good articles on different things on his blog spot that I was reading in preparation for this interview. So we're excited to have him on to discuss fascism, maybe how it relates to American society or politics. But first, of course, Anthony, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
No, simply thank you for having me on, both of y'all. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think important to talk about things that are, well, presciently going on.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why, we appreciate you making time for important conversations. I do want to start kind of broad just to give you the floor, maybe to catch up anyone who has heard the term fascism. Maybe they only know it from history books or, that one lesson back in fifth grade and they don't really know what fascism means. So what are not just, I guess, the definition of it, but what are like the actions, the rhetoric, the things associated with fascism as well?
Well, I think Americans confuse fascism for Nazism, but this wasn't the first expression of fascism. Fascism was founded by the Italian fascist Benito Mussolini, and if you read his text, The Doctrine of Fascism, the best way that you can define it after, I think, reading that text to make a simple definition is that fascism is hyper-nationalism. Now, the problem with it being hyper-nationalism is that each nation has a different way of expressing, the hyper version of itself. And so this makes it very hard to detect fascism because it has a different national expression each and every time. And so in that right, though, you'll still have a lot of fascists have tendencies towards, greatness, towards pride, towards military usage, towards using sort of social conservatism, but using it in such a way as to put like all energy towards the state, that everything's about the nation, the nation, the nation, the nation.
So I guess just quickly, what are the like core reoccurring patterns of fascism? Like, what is things that you would have to see or expect to see?
The things that you would simply have to see is when you have kind of all the symbols, the media, the rhetoric, the industry, the economy, right, all gearing itself towards the greatness of the nation, right? Where it's like
Mhm.
we're doing everything to make our nation stronger than every other nation by any means necessary. And so there are generally repetitive patterns, such as like, looking back nostalgically. But ultimately, what fascists will do, they'll take symbols new and old in order to express their ideas. So you'll see American fascists, right? They'll make use of like 1776, the stripes and the stars, don't tread on me. But then they'll also use like AI Ghibli images simultaneously. They'll use Pepe the Frog, but they'll use like Pepe the Frog in like Roman gladiatorial gear, right? The mix of the two. So for a fascist, right, there's these repetitive patterns of symbology, but that's because they'll just draw upon whatever thing they can draw upon to advance their rhetoric. Fascists are ultimately individuals who use the tactic of like postmodernism, that there is no grand truth, in order to direct everyone towards their grand truth of hyper nationalism.
Awesome. You can go ahead, swallow with your question.
Yeah. Um, so historically, fascist regimes have, been anti-liberal. They've been anti-Catholic. Obviously, as a Catholic, and they're obsessed with state power and stuff. So I was wondering, from your perspective, kind of what separates like a moral society that's just kind of grounded in like tradition from one that is, sort of grounded in ideology and sort of attached to like something specific, ideologically speaking.
Yeah, of course. I mean, social sec social secur wow. Social conservatism, say that 10 times fast, doesn't have to, accentuate into like harm towards anyone else. I'm a big personal fan of Ayn Rand, of a
Right.
true live and let live mentality. The problem with fascism is that it imposes its sort of thought on the state. As Mussolini writes, the nation does not have to be the majority. And so it's this sense where the social conservatism, don't know why I'm struggling with that, exits, individual house homes, exit individuals' thoughts and feelings, and becomes an imposition on people. If there's a happenstantial trend of people listening to country music or people wanting nuclear families, I don't care. Drive your F-150, right? That's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is when you run over someone with the F-150 or legally institute a certain type of religion, a certain type of family, right? This is the danger of fascism. It accentuates the nation as being in one type of general form.
Okay. Um, so kind of touching on that topic, do you think that there are any ideologies that kind of lend themselves easier to the fascist camp, like any sort of either secular or religious ideologies that don't just happen to align with it, like, but kind of, I guess, how do I want to say it? I guess I'm basically asking, are there any kinds of ideologies that people should stay away from if
That
they
that will
don't
pipeline
want?
people.
Yes, exactly.
Ultimately fascist because they will use anything. No, right? You'll see like Richard Dawkins, for example, supporting anti-trans positions, the
Right,
same as any other, Protestant that's
right,
potentially transphobic would, right? And so for the fascists, they will basically try to get this person on, oh, you don't like trans stuff. They'll try to get this person on, oh, you're unhappy with the economy, right? They use everything and then they go, hey, we have the solution, right? Let's just put all our energy into the nation. And a lot of times, the easiest way to get people to put all their energy into the nation is to have a human symbolic representation of that nation, be it Mussolini, be it Batista in Cuba, be it Hitler, and arguably in the United States, I think correctly, arguably, would be Trump in the United States.
mhm,
Yeah, and excuse me, I'm glad you brought up Trump because that kind of goes into what I wanted to ask you, because this is obviously the debate in America between the left and the right, and are we overreacting? Is this happening? Do you think, or would you be comfortable with saying that Donald Trump's rhetoric and actions, even since taking office, are to the point that you could deem them fascist? Are they just authoritarian? Because I've long considered him, at the very least, an authoritarian, but I do think that it's at least coming closer to being so nationalistic in his view that it has to be fascism. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are from like more of like a philosophical or a historical lens, and then what are the parallels that could be drawn if so?
Oh no, the Rubicon is well behind us. We have gotten past the point of Trump being a fascist for a while now, right? And a while now isn't like 2016 necessarily, right? Like I think Rachel Maddow was right eventually, right? So there's an apology to Rachel Maddow, but she was ringing the bell early. That being said, though, right, we don't need an exact time frame of when the Rubicon was crossed. It has been crossed.
Mm.
And the best parallels for Donald Trump are not necessarily Adolf Hitler or even Benito Mussolini, but would be Batista or Francisco Franco, right? Even though Franco rose to power in a much more violent way. Because again, right, the parallels of fascism are sort of the energies being placed into and the usage of postmodernism as a tactic towards that hyper nationalism, right? You had Trump on the campaign, for example, be both pro-war and anti-war, right? To draw in different people, right? You have Trump with that famous picture of him holding a LGBTQ plus for Trump flag, while now also passing executive orders that are, anti-trans, for example. And so for Trump, like, yes, he at this point in time is a fascist by pretty much every definition from scholarship, be it historical, sociological, political science, etc., of the sort.
I am curious, one more follow-up on that. What do you think works or operates as more of the pipeline, I guess, in America towards fascism? Because I think Trump both represents, at least optically, he wants to be seen as a populist, but then he also is very conservative in a lot of ways. So, and I think in a lot of ways, wanting to be a populist could lend itself to fascism, but I also think a lot of parts of conservatism could. I'm curious if you think one maybe gives way more than the other, or do you think it was the combination of both with him that kind of enabled this?
No, it's a material pipeline. And
Okay.
so this is why you'll have a lot of people who both like, for example, Trump and AOC. They'll like Trump and Bernie, because the pipeline is the concern over, material needs, material conditions, right? And so what gets people towards these sorts of ideologies is not just like, oh, I saw Matt Walsh's, what is a woman? Like, no, that's not the main pipeline, right? Someone who's watching that is already convinced on certain points, right? What really drives someone towards more extreme ideologies, be it communism or fascism, would be that, like, my material conditions suck. And so I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to vote for the person. I'm going to advocate for the person that says they're going to fix it, right? Trump says, right, I'm going to fix it, right? Trump just has to mention the word groceries, and that gets people on board. And his opponents were people who were mentioning vague tax cuts, which, yes, are things, they're useful things bureaucratically, but really, like, we see this pattern again and again, where Mussolini was going to fix the problems of Italy. Hitler was going to fix the problems of Italy. Franco was going to kick out the people that were destroying Italy. Batista instituted a Jim Crow style, regime of racism, to say the least. And so, yeah, that's what fascists will do. They'll take people who have bad material conditions and they'll speak to them and speak to those material conditions, as will communists and socialistas.
Kind of bouncing off of that, um, a popular thing on the right recently has been the whole like Jordan Peterson clean your room mentality, and sort of focusing on the self, and focusing on sort of like the local level before you worry about global warming or anything that's like about all of us. Um, do you think that the erosion of like family structures and religion and more traditional values and identities contributes, or can I ironically lead us towards a more authoritarian, like I guess, state of affairs? Or do you think people should sort of worry about like, worry about me, then my kids, then my parents, and so on, and kind of go that way? Does that question
For
make sense? I
me,
guess.
I always hold the view of por qué no los dos in so many situations, because I think oftentimes it's very easy to go, all right, either pull up your bootstraps or
Right.
it's the nation that needs to solve it. And I personally am a social democrat, right? And if you look at a lot of social democratic policies, they are both highly collectivist but allow for large levels of individualism, right? And so for me, I think it's a matter of both, right? I don't think a strong family value is necessarily instituting any particular type of family, right? A strong family is a unit of people that love each other and
Right.
care for each other. And so, yeah, I think that thing is always good. But what makes these sort of things difficult is when you don't have the money to raise a, family, right? Like the biggest correlation between childhood success in school, in health, et cetera, of the sort is money, right? The best students typically at any school are those that came from a wealthier background. And so, if you want to have strong family values, right, as shown by the relatively low divorce rates in Scandinavia, right, improving people's material conditions is a helpful thing. Yes, there are other cultural things and openness, but again, a good family shouldn't be marked by, the divorce rate. It should be marked by the number of people who find themselves in loving and caring conditions. That's who the true family is, the Epicurean family of, you pick your own family, you pick the friends around you that are your true family. And that could include your mom, your dad, abuelo, abuela, etc.
Okay, so it sounds kind of like, and correct me if I'm getting you wrong, that material concern and sort of, I guess we could just say, poverty overall,
Hmm.
um, and not even necessarily financial poverty. It could be poverty. I don't have any friends or family. I'm all alone. You're poor in that
Poverty
way.
of the soul, yes.
Exactly.
And that also is included for a lot of individuals who end up in extreme positions, right? They have this poverty of spirit where they don't feel connected to larger society.
Right. And so would you say that that's, if we had to pin down a, where does this come from? Why are people fascists? Or not why are they fascist, but why are they trying to get the rest of the country to become fascist rather? Is that missing portion of their lives, like the fact that they are missing either goods or, like you said, kind of sort of goods for the soul? Would you say that that's like the biggest cause of people be identifying with the nation rather than sort of, I
Yeah.
guess, staying with
Yeah, if you
themselves?
have someone that says they're going to fix your problems and you have problems, right, you're more likely to go along with them. In terms of them wanting to make others fascists, again, it's this sort of outlook of, okay, well, they say they're going to fix my problems, but they're speaking to national problems. So then it's just, the jump in logic of, well, okay, like they're fixing the nation's problems, including my own. This is what's best for everybody, right? Like I've had, a who I would call a fascist family member of mine. It's like, tell me like, oh, I support Trump for you, right? Referring to myself and my sister.
Right.
And meanwhile, the person he has just voted for, right, has, threatened like my own job with, federal funding stuff, right? I'm not saying that this was his intent, right, of
Right.
any malice towards myself and my sister. I actually think his intent is a good intent towards us. Like he genuinely thinks that this individual is
Right.
going to be better for us. However, he thinks it's going to be better for us at the backs of literally wanting to deport everyone that is, illegal, right? He'll make very malicious comments towards, oh, people who are here illegally, and not, looking at me being like, oh, we need to get these illegals out of here, while I have very close people in my
Right.
own life that did not come here the quote unquote correct way, but are good people. And so it's this, I think, sense of that like individuals that may go down certain rabbit holes, and this is true for any rabbit hole, may not understand the perspectives outside of that given rabbit hole.
What kind of problems do you think that the kind of conflation or misconstruction even of fascism as Nazism, the fact that I think a lot of people think it has to be this grandiose thing, like if we're not sending people to the gas chambers, it's not fascism. What kind of a problem do you think that poses in stopping or preventing fascism from blooming?
Yeah, it just one, most importantly, allows for a lot of horrors to still happen,
Mm.
right? It allows for the explicit racism of like Batista's regime, for example, to still happen. And so that's the most important thing. But secondly, it doesn't lead people to like speak out against it as much or even make or justify present conditions because it's like, oh, well, that's not real fascism. Like there aren't people being sent to death camps or this or that. But again, it is still a crime when someone's due process is not being tried, when someone is sent off to El Salvador, when, homes are raided without proper warrants, right? When someone is arrested for a free speech matter, a lot of the Palestinian stuff, right?
Mhm.
And this sort of stuff should stand no matter what somebody, thinks on the matter, right? There should be some basic protections. And that's what fascism can sometimes do. It can make itself appear that it's not as bad as it is and allow for that like slippery slope of like governmental norms and even like play with mass consciousness and go, hey, this is kind of how it always was. It was always the case that executive orders were laws. Don't you remember?
Yeah, so to follow up on that, because this is a problem I've had talking about actually, like you mentioned, the Palestinians, the what I would consider a genocide happening in Gaza is with the term genocide. I think a lot of people also they conflate it and they think of it like, oh, well, if it's not a Holocaust, it can't be a genocide, and it creates for me a paradox almost of where I don't know what's right. So this is completely opinion, but I'm curious in trying to get more people to understand, even just colloquially, what fascism is it right to say, should we go more about the lines that no, fascism can be mundane almost, like it can look not so extreme? Or should we keep like ringing the alarm that, hey, like fascism is this real scary thing and we all should know more about it?
For fascism, the mundanity allows for the cruelty, right? So a fascist never wears a soft face. A fascist is telling you ultimately at the end, they're hyper nationalist goals, right? They may start the conversation with 9/11 trutherism or transphobia, or even just like, hey, look how cool this AI stuff is, right? But again, when you get down to the bottom of their logic, right, then you see, the full details of the face. And so it's that sort of sense of that, like, hey, the mundane aspects, the aspects that may seem comical, right? Like, Trump wearing the Pope outfit, or, Trump calling Trudeau, Governor Trudeau, right? These things that may seem small, petty, and mundane are part of a larger narrative, right? Fascism is a larger grand narrative in the same way that conservatism is, liberalism is, communism is, right? And so there are these sorts of things joined together. And not every aspect of, let's say, communism is, blatantly, evil, right? One of the biggest things that communism pushes is, hey, we should have more robots so people have to work less. If you tell people that on the surface, it's like, okay, what about the whole jobs thing? But again, it's like, no, no, no. You won't have to worry about a job. The robots will do the work and you'll still have food and stuff to eat, right? That sounds okay. And so people aren't convinced by extremism just because of the extreme elements. Typically, it's the more mundane aspects or like little things, quote unquote, that lead to a larger narrative, right? You slip down the slide until you are in the pool. And once you're in the pool, well, you got to go swimming because you're not crawling back up. And if you are, it's very difficult.
Did you have?
Okay, so I'm kind of changing my question, but gonna kind of use some of what I wrote. Um, so I guess you were talking about at the beginning how a lot of people uh, it starts off as just like you said, just kind of casual comments about the nation and how great we are and we love America and I'm proud to be an American. And then of course, as you go on, they reveal their true selves. Where is the line between being a patriot and being a fascist? Because it feels like, from my perspective, and obviously you don't really know me, but I consider myself right wing, but I'm not a MAGA guy. Not I don't like Trump. It's not me. So,
Yeah.
but it feels like nowadays, me included, I'm called a fascist for having, I'm pro life. Oh,
Yeah.
you're a fascist. All of a sudden, so it feels like the term's kind of lost its meaning. So, kind of where is the line between I just like America and I'm a fascist?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I definitely want to dispel the myth that like everything the left doesn't like is fascism. There certainly are people like that where it's like, oh, it's a right-wing position they don't like, it automatically
Right.
becomes fascism. But fascism is a technical term. And actually, what we can do with your line is actually make it a tripart sort of thing. Now, there's no objective line between any of these three. I think me and you would stand as being patriotic, right? Even though I'm social democratic and you're
Right.
more conservative, right? We love the country, but want to improve it, right? We
Mhm.
see that there are flaws that can be improved, but still love the country.
Right.
To me, that's the definition of patriotism.
Mm.
Nationalism is where, you won't necessarily like, critique the country necessarily, but it's more along the lines of like, okay, like I love the country, but you're not like going to love your country at the absolute expense of all others.
Mm.
Fascism is hyper-nationalism. I love my country and I'm going to do anything and everything by any means necessary to make my country better than every other country. I will, economically destroy, I will conquer, I will use propaganda, I will use, religion, I will use any tools at my disposal to prop up my nation and destroy the rest. Mussolini talks about how fascism's end goal is absolute competition between all nations, and sort of to see who comes out on top. And so, yeah, there is this tripartite line between being patriotic, you love your country, there's things you love about it, there's, of course, good things, but there's things to improve. There's nationalism by, this sort of spectral line where it is, okay, I love my country, but there's no critiques, but it's not at the expense of all others. And then there's fascism, which, like almost this obsession with one's country at the cost of all others by any means necessary.
Okay. So following up on that with Trump, obviously he has this whole "Make America Great Again." That's his big slogan. Um, So that seems to imply that he thinks the country has problems, obviously, if he wants to make it great again, because he's
Mhm.
saying it's not great right now. Um, and so is there room for that in hypernationalism, or do you think it's more of a ploy and just kind of a tactic of him hiding
Yes.
behind the slogan, but he actually thinks America's, the best ever and we have no problems, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, I think it is one of those postmodern things. I mean, he picked it up from Ronald Reagan's campaign, for example, right? It's drawing whatever symbols and ideas you have before, right? I mean, yes, of course, fascists want to use their enemies to like prop themselves up. And so, right, like, Hitler did this with like the socialists,
Mhm.
for example. Obviously, Mussolini did this with the socialists. Franco did this with the Republicans, those who want a republic in Spain. And so, yeah, again, I think for Trump, though, it is this sort of belief that like America is already the greatest. And the thing that is holding back its greatness is, these evil Democrats, liberals, progressives, etc., holding it back. Like,
Immigrants.
yeah, immigrants, exactly, trans individuals. And so the great again is just, sort of a sloganism to get people to identify a type of enemy. Look who's in the way of America's true sort of greatness, right? America is great and amazing, right? So you'll hear Trump talk about this beautiful country, this amazing country, while also saying we need to make it great again. It's a sort of dog whistle towards, hey, hey, we got some people we need to get rid of. We got some people we need to get out of the picture, get out of the mix.
And
Yeah,
my
and
last, oh, sorry, I had one last follow
yeah,
up, if that's okay.
go ahead.
Just my last follow up on that. It's, do you think it should be like, I guess, allowed for people to be fascists? And by that, I mean, obviously, if somebody in politics, passes a law or does something like with the student who got deported or whatever, or the person in El Salvador prison, obviously, if they do things that are like illegal, like if they actually implement their fascist tendencies, that's one thing. But I just mean having the idea of, oh, America's the best ever. We isolationist, we're not going to help the other countries. It's all about us. Should that be allowed, or should we like, if you have those views in your campaigning, like you're disqualified, or kind of how
No,
do
I'm not a
we
thought
control
criminal.
that?
No, thought crimes, no, that makes, no, of course not, right? I mean, I
Sure.
teach at the university setting, right? And for example, like a fascist may want to kick me out the university, but teach your, line of reasoning, right? Like I think
Right.
ultimately to have a open educational system, to have a free and fair society, it has to be free. The danger with that is, as Aristotle pointed out, this tendency towards mobs, be they fascist mobs, communist mobs, etc., of the sort. And so, in that regard, what we end up with there is the danger of, yes, rhetoric, but to me, what's more dangerous is if, again, someone can get locked up for their thoughts, like Mahmoud Khalil, right? For, having a certain line of thought, get out of here, we're sending you to Louisiana. And so to me, it's along those lines of like, there doesn't need to be purity tests in this regard, right? The purity test is, if you're upholding a free and open society, right? To me, that's the real thing that needs to be kept, the actual actions, right? Because we can't have 1984 style thought
Right.
criminals.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, it's always been the difference is if you think like you said, the nation can do no wrong. Like if the nation does it, it's right then because the nation is always right, which is why I think MAGA is pretty fascist because I think a lot of them, not to generalize, but many of them will defend things just because Trump did it, just because it's America doing it, it's fine. But quickly, I did want to, I guess if Swa has one more question, he can fit it in too. But the last question I had for you was, when we see fascism play out, what is there for the people to do? Like when you're a person who opposes fascism in a society where maybe fascist movements are growing, what are the options for those people?
Well, the options are not always easy depending on the person, depending on how disenfranchised they are. Being from South Florida, right, there's a lot of individuals who, are part of migrant communities, whether, they're here, illegally or even on green cards, because there's concerns around that, right? It's harder for them to speak up and go about their normal lives. And so I think if you have any, privilege to just call it like it is or call it like you see it, right? Do that.
Yeah.
I think civil disobedience is a reasonable, measure. I think being involved with any sort of, political actions that would have existed before a change in regime. I saw this with my own grandparents in Cuba being labeled counter-revolutionary. And so it's in this regard, right? The best thing to do is act, you know, as the system was before, right? Yeah, and also act with kindness. I think that's the biggest thing. I think fascists, whether intentionally or unintentionally, right? Because I don't want to label everyone who believes that Donald Trump, should have been president, or everyone who has MAGA-based beliefs, right? Like it's a large portion of the country. I think a good estimate is, anyone who thinks we should invade Greenland. I think that's like a good measure of like who's on the track here, like kind of 20 to 25% of the United States at this point, which is a large block. But I think that sort of responsiveness should come with, kindness, openness, fairness, possible civil disobedience if you want to go there, political participation, and just calling things, like see them, honestly and with good intent.
Awesome.
Oh,
And did you have anything else you want to add, Swole?
yeah, that actually really plays into the last thing I wanted to ask, which was you said I don't want to blame all of them. Like maybe some of them don't actually have these views, or they're not actually fascist, or maybe they're not aware that they are.
Yes, I think
Do
that's the
you
bigger
think
one.
that Trump is aware that he is a fascist and is doing it on purpose? And do you think that what he's done so far is this time around, not talking about January 6th and all that, but this time around is impeachable?
Oh, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of things here that are impeachable, such as him just directly challenging a 9-0 ruling.
Yeah.
And so, again, I could talk about like a general psychoanalysis of like, yeah, of course, there's people who are unconsciously aware of their like views or political positions. Like, I'm sure I'm unconsciously beholding plenty of views and positions that I'm not fully aware of. So this is just a human tendency. Again, the concern here, though, isn't like if Trump is aware or not of what he's doing, right? If it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it's pretty much a duck, right? Or it is a duck. So at the end of the day, right, whether he knows it or doesn't know it, fascist is fascist does. And, I think that's the bigger concern of seeing it play out.
Yeah, I guess my concern is, or not concern, but I guess the thing I'm wondering about is if we should picture Trump as some evil mustache twirling fascist who has like some secret plan, not plan, but or secret, but a plan, or if it's more like he's just a stupid businessman who has a certain type of viewpoint that just happens to align with this
I mean, are
fascism,
both not dangerous,
or both
right? Like,
and, yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, there's no lesser of two evils here. There is
Right,
just, existent harms that will occur to people, right? Like
sure,
every time fascism arises, it's going to harm those who are not, propagated under the nation, whether it be socialists in Italy, Jews in Germany, Afro-Cubanos in Cuba, Republicans in Spain, right? We can go again and again, unfortunately, on examples here that there's always an ostracized group. And so the bigger concern here around the fascism is how it affects, just people's day-to-day lives. The important thing to talk about this is not as just some like ideological labeling thing of like, oh, we can call that man bad. We can look at him as the mustache twirler.
right.
Twirl your mustache all you want. If you're twirling your mustache and you're making people's lives better, like everyone's, you're not causing any harm or violence, like, it's not about appearances, it's not about beliefs necessarily, it's about those beliefs in action, like when there is harm towards individuals.
Yeah. So, Anthony, I just want to say again, thank you for sharing your
Yeah, thank you.
time, your knowledge with
Yeah.
us. I thought it was a really insightful conversation. If you want, send me something. I'll make sure to link it, like one of your, whether your blog or one of your essays or something, and we'll link it in the description. And then I would like to say we would love to have you back on
Oh,
maybe
thank you.
for
Absolutely.
another relevant topic as well.
Yeah, I
Next
took a
time I'm
bunch of
back,
notes.
next
I
time
was
I'm back,
into
I'll
it.
learn how to say social conservatism.
Yeah.
There we go. We'll make sure we got it on the first time. But yeah, so thank you again, my man, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
What'd you think? Did you enjoy the conversation?
Oh yeah, like I said, I got a page full of notes I was
Yeah.
taking. I thought it was awesome. I realized I was one of those guys. I mean, I knew it was different from Nazism. Just, I mean, you can just Google it and look at the definition.
Yeah.
But in my mind, when people say such and such is a fascist, I think of, like, if you've ever seen like House of Cards, where
Yeah.
President Frank goes in and he just like blackmailing people and taking everything over, and it's like super aggressive and in your face,
Mhm.
and you're just looking at Trump or even some of the other conservatives who obviously may not even be in politics, and you're like, I don't really know that that fits. But hearing him talk about hyper nationalism, that kind of gives it a different perspective in my mind of how to judge and parse different actions from this administration specifically.
Yeah, and I think it's I don't know if I would say it's like a civic failure, an educational failure or what, but that a lot of those more academic terms are lost on the general population at least. And so it's like colloquially, we don't know what to call anything. But yeah, I am excited. We're moving on. This is the first time that we've done a Q&A. I just thought it might fit well with our first interview as well. So we have not a bunch of questions. I knew we wouldn't have a lot of time mixed with the interview, but we have 6, 7 maybe. I figured I have ones that I know were for you and the ones were for me. We'll just go back and forth. I'll read yours. You can answer. If I have something to add, I'll add. And then mine, I'll answer. If you have something to add, you can add. And if we debate about one or whatever, it happens. So the first one's from Maria. So thank you, Maria, for giving us a question. And it is for you, Swa. You're in the hot seat first. The Catholic Church has 501c3 tax exempt status or tax status. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I'm sure you might know more than I do. But it's like what most churches and organizations have. She asked if, like the Heritage Foundation, they wrote and supported Project 2025, which we know is an agenda that Trump is using to destroy democracy, shouldn't they be held accountable for supporting political agendas? Because that is against the law. And then she said it could be divided against us. You're the Catholic specialist, obviously, so you can go.
Sure. Yeah. So, like you said, thank you, Maria, for the question. Obviously, this is a a concerning and big topic. But just to clarify a few things, I know you were saying you're not super up to date on the organizations and tax statuses. So, 501c3 is a nonprofit. That's one of the nonprofit tax statuses, and that is typically what most like I worked for a nonprofit coffee shop. We were a 501c3. Most churches, stuff like that. And so they are actually allowed to legally speak on moral issues. And those moral issues might happen to have political implications. And so while the church can't come out and be like, everybody vote for Trump, that's what the Catholic Church is voting says. They can't do that. But obviously they can talk about sanctity of life, the family. They can talk about, the Catholic Church's view on marriage and all of these things that just happen to be politicized, but are really more philosophical, moral
Do you think the
things.
church has crossed the line at all?
I don't think so. And I wanted to add one more thing, that the Heritage Foundation is actually like a think tank sort of thing. And so they actually have a different tax status of 501c4, and they are allowed to advocate for political things. So neither the church nor the Heritage Foundation is breaking the law here. And let's be honest, Planned Parenthood, ACLU, this isn't like this is a it's on both sides, but there's organizations on both sides who are kind of loosely involved with shaping political agendas. It's not just right wing people. So
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. I would say there's a lot more money on the conservative side. But yeah, I don't have a lot to add just because I don't know like a whole lot about the church tax exemption status and stuff, if I'm being honest. I know that for me, my position, the lover of taxation that I'm worried of anything that is tax exempt or gets deductions, but I don't know what the justifications for the church having them are. So yeah, I don't know.
honestly, neither do I, other than freedom of religion. That's just all I could really. I've
I'm
never really looked
agnostic.
into it.
I'm agnostic. I think maybe we could probably tax churches, but like if we don't, I don't really care if they're going to stay out of politics. But like if we're going to get in politics at that point, then I have a problem. But I mean, and maybe I'm playing the progressive role bad here, but I don't know too much about churches getting directly involved in politics in a way that I would say is like unethical. So
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is, I mean, obviously there's the whole recent thing with the bishops, the US College of
Yeah, which
Bishops
I don't care about that
arguing
at
with
all.
Trump.
Yeah, I don't like
It's
if you
like, is that crossing a line to
yeah.
people
To
for them
me
to speak out
personally,
on a
yeah.
moral thing?
To
I don't
me,
see
I
that.
wouldn't even care if the church gave, even if it's things I disagreed with, if they went and were like, pro-life is the only, like, I don't care
Right.
about that. If
Right.
you're, though,
That's like
like,
what they're supposed to do.
if
That's
you're,
it's
if
the
you're like
church.
taking your tithes or whatever, though, and you're like donating those to Donald Trump or something, then maybe we could talk about
Oh,
tax.
like the church is taking the money.
Yeah,
That would, I wouldn't like that.
yeah, but I don't think that happens. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
to me, it's like, I don't care. But Maria, thanks for the question anyway. I appreciate it. The next one is for me. So I'm on the hot seat and it's from Zeke. Zeke is a longtime subscriber, so he gets an extra shout out from me. I
Shout
appreciate you,
out to
Zeke.
Zeke.
Yes, sir. He's my guy for real. He asked, can businesses still make money under socialism? Now, and I want to preface this by saying that I am like the middle child, I feel like, of lefties. So like, I'm going to piss off probably both liberals and socialists when I say this. Yes, businesses can still make money under socialism. Essentially, it's just socialism is just like an organization. It's like a structure or a way you can organize really society, but in business, it would be profit, right? Whereas you got to think in capitalism, capital controls profit, right? Like profit is always directed to capital, and then they divvy out the profits to labor, right? And socialism, profits are directed by labor and capital isn't involved. So like in socialism is a wide ideology. I would associate with market socialism. I'm not against markets existing. I know there's people who are socialists who would say that money shouldn't exist and things like that. And they would probably, obviously they would say, then you don't make money, right? I don't think businesses making money is a problem. In the end, I just think that if the ownership of the business is socialized, the profit structure of the business is socialized more so onto labor than capital, you essentially have socialism.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on that because it would spin off into a big debate.
Yeah, which we'll run that one of these days. We'll run it as a long form debate, and you guys can all be ready for it. Zeke asked another one that was a follow up, and before he has one for you as well, Swal. But he also said, how can we no longer make socialism the boogeyman in politics? I don't know. This is something I deal with personally. I think there's a lot of bad optics around socialism, and there's two reasons for that, right? One, there's a lot of like psychopaths who consider themselves socialists, right? Who would just say the most psychotic things online and just do the most like just cringy psychotic stuff. And that hurts any movement, right? It's the same reason that MAGA has bad optics. As much as MAGA wants to say they're popular, MAGA has psychopaths who says psychotic things. So if you're like the normal guy who voted for Trump, you're probably still getting looked at like, you're a psychopath. You voted for this guy, right? And with socialism, the same thing. But also, there's a lot of money, a lot of cash incentives from capitalists to keep socialism looking bad. Like I'm at the point in my life that like I don't even really care. I used to I more so liked saying I was a socialist, which I do believe in like socialist tendencies. Don't get me wrong. I more so like to say it because it triggered people, right? But like now it's like there is almost like a hindrance in like if you say you're a socialist, all of a sudden you're like attached with all these things that I don't even like believe or care about. And for that, I think there is like detriment to it. I just think more normalizing and talking in this episode was about talking about terms that aren't colloquially used, like fascism. I think the same with socialism could be true because a lot of people don't know anything about socialism. They think it's Marxism. They think that it's, take money from rich people, and most people couldn't define it.
Yeah, I was going to bring it back to the fascism thing that we were talking about earlier with the term just getting watered down and confused by lay people using and misusing the
Especially when
terms.
you have like Trump at this point, we'll say like Joe Biden is a socialist, and it's like it's
Right, right. And then of course, then it's the national, I forget what the A is for, but socialist party or whatever was what the Nazis were. So then you've got some people think of socialists as like crazy lefties, but then you've got like the Nazis who are socialists, but then Joe Biden's a so it's like
and
what
we
does
don't
this
have to
mean
we don't have to
anymore?
spin into
You know?
we don't have to spin this into a Nazi debate. But the Nazis weren't socialists, but they
No,
did
I just mean they use the word too. So I'm saying this is just the words are just it's being thrown around by
yeah.
both sides, and it
Yeah,
doesn't make
and
sense.
it's just like, I don't know, like I would say that there's probably not any politicians, like maybe Bernie Sanders, maybe like Bernie Sanders and AOC are like market socialists, maybe, like AOC, maybe, probably not even Bernie Sanders, but I digress. We'll save that for a socialism capitalism debate. Zeke, thank you. Zeke, question number 2 now for Swa. Why? Well, yeah. Okay. So he asked this as 2-part question. It's 2 questions
Okay.
as well. So why are you conservative? And then he asks with it, does it have to do with your faith?
Why am I conservative is such a vague question, I guess. Because like, how's the best to answer this? I mean, I'm a conservative because I hold views that seem to align with what people describe as conservative.
Does your
Obviously, I'm
faith play
pro.
into it?
So now it does, but it didn't initially. Because for those of you who don't know, uh, I'm a recent convert. So I was not. I was an atheist up until a few months ago. So
And how long have you been conservative? So they know.
I would argue my the whole life. I've never been anything else. I mean, you know how it is when you're younger. You just sort of
Just pick and choose.
parrot.
Yeah.
You just kind of parrot what's like you're hearing, and then once you start getting to high school and you like start like history classes or government classes and stuff, you start to learn a little bit more and you start to choose. Uh, and I feel like a lot of us have that angsty libertarian phase. I had that where I was like, oh man, nobody can tell me what to do. A lot of people have that, and then I kind of settled on. No, actually, people can tell me what to do. They should tell me what to do if it aligns with the core values of
Yeah.
the country. But yeah, it's not like my views. There's no intellectual backing for them. It's not like the Bible says I would never use that. It's not convincing to anyone. So
So just quick, proud to say, never had a libertarian phase. Did have a anarchist level communist phase though, from like 16 to 18.
other side of the coin, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're kind of the
Basically,
same thing. Yeah.
nobody can tell us we don't need laws. We don't. Yeah,
Yeah. And then the other one from Zeke was, if you were not a Catholic, would you be okay with LGBT rights things, rights for women's health care? I think he's pertaining that mostly to abortion.
right. So abortion, absolutely not. LGBT stuff, yes on marriage, yes on adoption, yes on transition 18 up, no on transition 18 down. I don't know what other LGBT related things there are, but yeah, I considered myself. I started calling myself a classical liberal, more in the what is it? Was that guy's Bill Maher? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Bill Maher, Joe Rogan, more of like the. I definitely have some conservative takes, but like it's not like I. But now, obviously, with my faith, I'm not supposed to or allowed to support those types of things. But yeah, if I wasn't, then I would. Yes, absolutely, on those
Cool.
ones.
Yeah, I don't have a lot. That's not really one that I could weigh. How dare
Right.
you, Swa? Yeah, no, and I guess for those who didn't know, me and Swa actually have a debate on my channel from before he was a Catholic. If you want to hear him debate from non-religious perspectives, we have that. So next one was from Chandler Chan for something I don't remember exactly. Shout out Chandler though. Thanks for the
Shout
question.
out Chandler.
He wants to know pros and cons of both parties. I thought maybe we could both go with our party and then we could go opposite. So I could start with Democrats. Pro is for me is like they're always going to be the better party on social issues, which is one of my main concerns. They're always going to be more in support of like LGBTQ issues, race relations. They're more they care more about things like climate change, the environment. They're more for the working class. They try to pass policies that benefit the worker, the everyday average American more so than the wealthy. And then just also, I think by virtue of like who they're up against, right? I'm someone who I've never associated with the Democratic Party before this year. I would probably call myself a Democrat now, though I'm to the left of a lot of the Democratic Party. But yeah, so there's a lot of pros. I think most of them are socially. I think if you look historically, well, Democrats are objectively historically been better on the economy. So I think if you look historically, there's good things you can see from Democrats. Another pro is I think the combination of Democrats' electability with being perceptive to left social movements on the ground have brought some of the best legislative gains that we've ever had, like with gay marriage, with even abort, like we kind of lost on the abortion front now, but abortion for a while, things like I think I said gay marriage, but there's
Yeah.
like if you think of most of the wins that have been made in politics from like that you would consider a win from a left perspective, it's the combination of Democrats being electable and social movements on the ground and then being open to them. Cons is a lot of the times, and I mean this is just campaign wise, but they promise a lot of things that they don't deliver on. And the biggest con for me is that if a policy or something isn't electable, if they don't consider it like an electable policy, they won't support it. Like they don't support universal health care on the merit of everyone deserves health care. They started to support it when Bernie Sanders popularized it, right? They didn't support gay marriage until it was kind of like more of a forefront issue. And then now they all support it, which is like good in that Republicans probably would do away with gay marriage if they could get away with it politically. And that's more so the only reason that they would support it, whereas Democrats can come around with time. But yeah, so pros and cons for Republicans from you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do conservative progressive because
Yeah.
I'm not a Republican. I don't really care about them. But
Yeah.
so for the progressives, I say pro. You kind of talked about it. They, support a lot of public services like healthcare, education, welfare, stuff like that, welfare programs, and at least lip service wise, they, try to go after those who are the outskirts of society, the minorities, whether that's like racial, financial, whatever. They emphasize communal responsibilities, social justice, a lot of positive stuff that I align with and support. Um, and then on the con side for them, I would say that in doing all of that, a lot of times they have a tendency to try to force participation in what could be morally objectionable stuff for the individual. So, like, for instance, state or government sponsored or allowing of abortions or gender ideology or any of that stuff that the individual may not agree with, but because they have no control over where their taxes go, they might be supporting something that they don't agree with. Which I know that that's going to come up in a second here, but and then risk of expanding the government. I worry about people kind of moving ideologically away from caring about their local communities and their local families and sort of these types of things and focusing more on the nation or the world or global warming and all these bigger problems that people seem to focus on with neglecting what's happening in their backyards a lot of times. And then with the conservatives, I'd say pro is obviously from where I stand, upholding moral and conscious responsibilities. They advocate for a reduction in spending for the government and the moral programs and the smaller government and not having them overreach into your lives. Subsidiarity, local governments, and I just obviously align with a lot more of their policies when it comes to more traditional values. And I honestly think that they are more realist than the left seems to be. Stuff like the Green New Deal, which I know didn't pass and it was never going to pass or anything. But there's a lot of, I think people think the government can do a lot more than it can on the left and have these lofty ideas, whereas the conservatives are kind of like, yeah, it's never going to happen. So I'll do it, or this organization will do it, or we'll do it more on a smaller scale. And then cons obviously can veer towards just anti government. Can't trust anybody, can't trust the institutions, can't trust the news, can't trust. It's like, then what are we even doing at this point? Then I can't even live. Like, I can't trust the grocery store guy. He was looking at me weird when he put my groceries in the bag. Like, bro, calm down.
I get nervous when I see black pilots on an airplane.
Right. Oh my goodness, that drives me crazy. Oh, I'd rather just walk. I'd rather swim to Canada instead. It's like, shut up. Um, may overlook societal obligations, at least on a more collectivist level. I mean, numbers wise, the conservatives do personal, meaning me or your family, do personal charity way more than the liberals. But obviously, when it comes to like the government and backing our country or our state or anybody like doing any collective action, they just completely act like that's just not something we can do, which I completely disagree with. And then just disengagement from the system overall. And then, of course, Trump, if I could just put him as a con.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So my pros, a lot of them would be, I feel like don't apply as much with MAGA, because MAGA is just batshit crazy. But what I will
Right.
say is one thing that conservatives, Republicans got more right than anything else was from the worst human being of all time, the worst president of all time, Ronald Reagan, when he said that we're the shining city on the hill. Like that is something he was spitting when he said that, right? That's something conservatives used to believe that I
Yes.
think is like I agree with Mitch McConnell on that. I never thought I'd agree with Mitch McConnell on anything. Me and him agree that America has a responsibility to protect the free world. I think that's a good thing. Also would be another one that doesn't exist anymore because Trump is batshit crazy. I lean more towards free trade than protectionism. I think that tariffs generally are a bad idea. Conservatives for the longest time had that idea: free market, free trade. You know, I think word association might have had more to do with that than anything. They're not the smartest people, but now they're all tariff protectionists. So who knows? I don't know. Like, can't agree with them there. They were right about free trade, though. I'll give them that one. The other one I think would be in sentiment mostly. I agree with fiscal responsibility. I just don't think that Republicans are fiscally responsible, but I do think they parrot that, which is a good thing, right? I just don't think like massive tax cuts are fiscally responsible, and that's not going to pay. They're not going to pay for themselves. Like Trump, his tax cuts in 2017 cost $2 trillion. They brought $6 billion in additional revenue each year. That would take like 330 years to pay for itself. I think we should be signing things into law that will pay for themselves in a decade or two. And then cons, I mean, watch my channel if you want to know the cons. I don't want to turn this into a 3-hour video of me listing cons. They're conspiratorial. I don't think they can deal with reality when it disagrees with them. They're often stuck in confirmation bubbles. Republicans are frustrating. But so we'll end on this one. We have one more. This was asked by somebody whose username was a bunch of letters. So sorry that I can't reiterate. It was like RD something, I don't know. But what does freedom mean to you? You can go first, Swan.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with a quote from Saint Pope John Paul II. As soon as I find where I wrote this, yeah. So yeah, Saint John Paul II. He was one of our popes in the nine. I'm not going to say the time because I'm going to get it wrong. A recent modern day pope. He said that freedom consists not in doing what we like, but in having the right to do what we ought. And so, from my perspective, it's not just about doing, oh, I can do whatever I want. It's about having the ability to do what's right. And as a Catholic and as a classical liberal, I just believe that true freedom is ordered towards truth, virtue, and human flourishing. It's not chaos or license to just do whatever you want and go on a murder spree or anything like that. That's not freedom because then I don't have the freedom to not get murdered. So freedom without moral responsibility is just self-destructive and isn't any real freedom, which is why the founders themselves, said that we were one nation under God because we have to have this perspective of morality in order to have freedom to begin with. So I'd say we need a moral compass to have true freedom.
Yeah, I think freedom is positive liberty, and that means the ability to act. Essentially, I think that freedom is the opportunity to act on your desires, your wants, your needs, whatever it might be. I just think that freedom essentially is if you want to do something, you will be able to do it. I think like a lot of people think of freedom as a negative liberty, which is like the lack of restriction, which I think is wrong. Like I think if you drop someone in the desert with nothing, they're like free in the sense that there's no laws stopping them from doing anything, but they're not like free to like build a house if that's what they want to do. Good luck, right? Or like survive, good luck, right? If that's what they want to do. And that's why I think like inherently there's a lack of freedom in capitalism. That's I think one of my biggest qualms with capitalism is that, and I'll just quickly use the coconut analogy because it's a banger, right? If me and Swal were on a plane and we crashed into an island where there was one source of water and I barricaded it off and there were coconuts was the only source of food. And when we crash into this plane, Swal gets knocked out and I wake up before Swal. I barricade the water. I collect all the coconuts and I find a gun on the plane. And when Swal wakes up, he's like, "Hey man, I'm hungry. Can I have some coconuts?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can have some coconuts if you build me a house and suck my dick." Like how free are you then? You know, how is that freedom? No, it's coercion. But
It,
go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, you said, but you start.
I was
Whatever
just
you were
going to
gonna
jump
say.
on. So if you had something to add, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I don't find that analogy to really map on, but we don't need to, I
Yeah.
guess, debate about that.
No, we don't have to.
But it sounds like we somewhat agree. Where I just framed it as, because you said it's about having the freedom to do what you want to do. So if you're in the desert and you don't have any money or resources to build a house, you don't actually have the freedom to build a house. Similarly, if we have no laws and everybody's going around murdering, then I have no freedom to not get murdered. Would you agree with that idea
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
have to have some sort of
Yeah.
lack of freedoms to
Mhm.
enable the other freedoms, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's about enabling the ability to act for the most amount of people. You can never do everything for everyone, you know.
Right.
So, yeah. So I did see we did have one more question. We'll just do this real quick. We'll each list 3 things, right? We'll just list 3 things, so it's real fast.
Okay.
What responsibilities should one have in their community outside of voting?
You go first, because
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of vague, kind of a hard one. I would say like I think you'd have responsibilities to your neighbor. There's some sort of responsibility. I don't think like in neighbor being a vague sense, like to your community, to others in your community, where like if someone needs help and you have the ability to help them, you probably should. Like if we're talking about morally more should you ought or ought not to, you probably ought to help someone in your community. I think you have a responsibility to be productive in one way or the other. I don't think that that has a direct tie to like finances, but I just think like productive, whether it be, I don't know, in helping and finances and emotionally, however you can help from one's ability to others' need, right? And then the third would be like, I don't know, the third one's the one that I struggle the most with, like helping provide. Even then, that's the same. This is a hard question for me. I don't know, Swall. What's your 3? Let me figure out. Let me cheat off of you.
yeah, no, I said that other than voting, obviously, that we should serve our neighbors, which you can swap that out for community if it's easier to imagine who I don't mean
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
Raise strong families. And as Anthony mentioned earlier, that doesn't necessarily mean, I birthed the children. That it just means your family, whatever that looks like. And then I said support our churches, which of course is just from a
Yeah.
Catholic standpoint.
Boo. No, I'm just kidding.
But did we forget the one about um or did you ask me the one about if I
Oh,
feel moral responsibility?
yes, you're
Yeah.
right. I almost missed Tommy's, and I love Tommy too. I would have been sad. He would have been sad if I missed it. Also, a longtime subscriber, though he is a vehement Trump supporter, so we don't get along, but
Oh man,
we are cool.
Tommy's on my side.
Yes,
Well,
he's
I
on
guess
your
not
side.
because I'm not a Trump supporter either, but more on my side.
Yes. And he asked you essentially like, what is the moral weight it places on you, knowing that you have to pay taxes for things that go against your religious principles?
Right. So luckily the church has spoken about this, and so we have this there's discussion about material culpability and stuff. I won't bore you guys all with the theology and the detail, but essentially, if I can avoid it, so like, let's say I wanted to buy or I need a phone to communicate with people, just as part of the modern world. Let's say I know that iPhone uses child labor, and I know that Google with their Pixels does not. Then I would have a moral obligation to get the Pixel. But like, let's say Google, Apple, I don't know the other companies right now, Samsung, whatever. Every company uses child labor. Now I I'm distanced because there's no way for me to, without great disservice to myself, with how I need to experience modern day 2025, to not have a phone that doesn't in some way contribute to this immoral thing. And so the church says that I'm not morally culpable for that because it's how removed it is from me. So it just kind of depends on how much say I have. Obviously, with taxes, my opinion that is that taxes is just the government showing up to my door with a gun and saying, give me, opening a bag and saying, give me the money. I have no say in that. And I have no say in what they do with the money once they've robbed me. So I can't really feel morally guilty about what the government does. I can vote and I can try to advocate for how I think it should be spent, but at the end of the day, it's completely outside of my control. And of course, Jesus said, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto the temple what is the temple," or whatever. So I got to pay my taxes. I got to be a good citizen. So Jesus commanded me to do it.
Yeah, so my only tidbit on that is quit being crybabies and pay your damn taxes. For trying to find ways to not to pay taxes.
They're knocking on my door. They got the guns. Continue.
And they should, and they absolutely should. So, guys, let us know if you enjoyed this kind of different format with a guest. We'll definitely have Anthony back on, especially if you guys enjoyed him. We'll look for other guests as well. And if you guys don't know, we're here every week, Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, not just on the website, but we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on YouTube now also. So I'll have that linked somewhere in the description or whatever if you guys want to check it out there. Or if you're already there, make sure you like and subscribe. And until next time, we will see ya. Peace.
Peace.